Hello and welcome back to the garage. As ever, I am John and that is Kieran from the YouTube channel Mech'It Better. Now we are here with another video designed to keep you safe on the roads.
That's right. So in the first instalment we had an overview of things to check before you ride. The most important one is brakes. So that's what we'll be looking at in more detail today.
As we had in the last video, we've got the Honda CG125 and Suzuki Address 110 to work on. We've got disc brakes and drum brakes, so let's have a look at those now. Both of these types of bikes have two different types of brakes. At the front they use a disc brake system, and at the back they use a drum brake system, so we'll start off by having a look at the differences between the two.
Up front we've got the disc brake, and we apply that from the lever at the handlebars, which then forces fluid from the reservoir down the brake hose into the caliper, where we squeeze two pads of friction material onto the disc, and that slows you down and hopefully brings you to a stop.
Here at the back then is a drum brake, and the drum brake is different to a disc brake because there's no fluid in the system. The drum is actually built into the wheel itself, and as you press the foot brake, some friction material is pressed outwards into the wheel, creating friction, which hopefully brings you to a stop. So now we know what the two different types of brake systems look like, let's have a look at how to maintain them.
So first off, we're going to go over to the reservoir for the disc brake, and we're going to check the level and how to top up if necessary.
Taking the top off the reservoir then is as simple as undoing the two screws on top of it. You might be able to see that we've put a towel down on the paintwork of the bike, and that's because brake fluid is really horrible stuff, and if you get it on the paintwork it will just strip the paintwork, so do be careful not to spill that. You can see Kieran's got gloves on as well for the same exact reason. This stuff is not good for your skin at all, so please wear gloves and look after your paintwork. So here's the top of the reservoir coming off then. There's a little plastic piece underneath and a rubber piece underneath that one. And underneath all of that is the brake fluid. Let's have a closer look at that now. Here we are then, here's the brake fluid jiggling about. And this is good brake fluid, this is the correct colour, it's quite clear, and the level is good. If the level was just low we could top that up, but if the brake fluid itself was cloudy or dirty, that probably means it's really old and it's not doing its job properly. So if that's the case on your bike, our advice is just to take it to a mechanic at this point, because it's a little bit more complicated changing that. But we will discuss topping up.
Topping up is as easy as carefully pouring in from the bottle, but you want to make sure that you've got the right specification for your bike, because they do vary, so check your manual.
Once you're happy with the level of the fluid, all you need to do is put the pieces back in the order that you found them, put the screws back in, and check the level of the fluid in the window. Now that we've topped up that brake fluid reservoir, just squeeze on the lever and make sure that it feels nice and firm and positive.
It's good.
If it doesn't, if it feels soft and squishy, there's probably air in the system, and that's a little bit more advanced than we're going to get into right now. So for now, we'll just say have a chat with your local mechanic.
Moving on from fluid, we follow the line down to the disc and pads. Now over time these will start to wear down and need replacing, so we're going to take this caliper off and have a closer look. Most of the time it will just be a couple of bolts with a bit of a wiggle. You can remove the caliper, and it's important at this stage that you don't squeeze the lever, as that will squish them further together and make it difficult to get back on. With the caliper removed, we get a good view of the friction material on each of the brake pads. Now these, like most, have an indicator, which is the groove running through the pads, and if your pads have worn down to the point where you can't see that groove anymore, it's time for a change. Now some pads don't have this indicator, so you need to check your manual to see what the minimum thickness is. When it comes to refitting the caliper, we want to make sure that the pads are on either side of the disc, and when you've got the bolts back in, make sure that they're on nice and tight so it doesn't come off.
One more thing to note with the front disc brake is the thickness of the disc itself. Now, as with the brake friction material on the pads, these do wear down over time. Admittedly, it is a long time, but it is something that you do need to check. So what you can do is to check the thickness of the disc with a set of vernier calipers. Now in this case the minimum thickness on this disc is 3.5mm, and that's written on the disc itself. If it's not written on your disc, it may well be in the manual. So all you need to do is take the minimum thickness and your vernier calipers, measure the thickness, and if it is at least that thickness, then you're good to go for a little while longer. While we're down here, let's have a look at the brake hose itself. Just make sure it's secure at the top and the bottom, make sure it's not leaking, and have a look all the way down for any bulges or any tears or any damage. If there is any damage, please just replace that brake hose, because if it fails while you're riding, that is going to end badly.
So moving on, it's time to look at the drum brakes. So whether it's a foot pedal or a lever on the handlebars, it should still feel firm and positive. If it doesn't, then it'll need adjusting, and that's what we'll look at now. To make adjustments to the drum brake, place the bike on the centre stand and make sure that the wheels can spin freely. Wind in the adjuster nut until the wheel can't be turned anymore by hand. Now, slowly unwind the nut until you find the point where the wheel can just move freely again. At this point, recheck the feel at the pedal or lever, and you should not be able to turn the wheel with the brake applied.
On a drum brake like this, it's really easy to tell if you've run out of friction material. There's a little pointer attached to this arm here, and a triangle cast into the metal of the drum itself. Now with the brake on full and held on, if the pointer points directly towards that triangle, that would indicate that you've run out of friction material. As it is with mine, you can see that it points off here somewhere, so I've got plenty of friction material left. Just a quick note, if your bike is a little bit older, you might have a wear indicator that looks like this, and it's really easy to tell if this needs replacing. When you put the brake on, you can see the indicator moves across this raised section, and with the brake on, if it reaches all the way to the end of that raised section, that means that the brake shoes need to be replaced. If it only reaches part of the way, then you've still got some wear left. So with all of that done, the drum brake should work perfectly. If you've done everything we've said here and it's still not right, it's possible that the cable between the lever and the brake has stretched, and there's nothing for it, you're just going to have to replace that. So that was our slightly more in detail look at maintaining your brakes. As with all things brake related, please, before you go anywhere, before you even start your engine, just push your bike up and down and test that the brake's going to work before you start riding.
And if you are unsure about the condition of any of your braking components or the adjustments that you have made, then do go and speak to a professional, because they're going to know what they're doing better than you or I.
Yeah, they no doubt will. So that brings us to the end of this video. As we mentioned in the last one and earlier in this one, we've got a whole series of these coming, so please stick around and hopefully we shall see you on the next one. Ta-da!